Blood smells like copper and old pennies. But hospital politics smell like cheap lavender lotion and the exhaustion of people who have confused authority with competence. I know both smells the way you know your own kitchen in the dark, without thinking, without searching, just by moving through the air. I'd been a float nurse at Mercy General for 11 months when the night that changed everything began. They thought I was just the quiet one, the limping one, the nobody from the temp agency. Then 4 MH-60M Blackhawks rattled the glass out of the emergency bay windows, and heavily armed men in full tactical kit moved through the lobby shouting for someone named Ghost 7. Nobody looked for me. I was already against the wall. Now, let me tell you how we got there. My name is Sarah Voss. I took the float position because float nurses are furniture. You come in, you work your bay, you go home. Nobody learns your last name until they need a body to blame, and by that point you're already filing your paperwork to transfer somewhere else. I'd taken float positions at 3 different hospitals in 18 months. Mercy General was the 4th. And it was, if anything, quieter than the others. The ER ran on the particular organized chaos of a mid-size regional trauma center. Not big enough to get the worst cases, not small enough to turn them away. The air smelled like antiseptic and the faint sweet decay of diabetic ketoacidosis drifting out of Bay 2. Underlaid always by the cloying lavender of the charge nurse's hand sanitizer and the used motor oil they passed off as coffee in the break room. The fluorescent lights hummed, not buzzed, hummed, at a low abrasive frequency that burrowed behind your eyes around hour 5 of a 12-hour shift. I'd learned to stop noticing it sometime around Helmand Province, 2019, when the sounds you had to notice were considerably less comfortable than fluorescent lights. To the civilian staff, the ER was a war zone. To me, it was a waiting room. It was a waiting. I did my job with the particular economy of motion that nobody at Mercy General thought to question. I found failing veins by feel before residents found them by sight. I noted exit locations when I entered a room. Both exits, automatically, before anything else. My hands didn't shake when the monitor screamed. My pulse flattened slightly the way it does when there is a problem that requires solving and not experiencing. And I moved to where I was needed, and I did what was needed, and I did not explain myself afterward. None of the staff found this remarkable. They thought I was just competent. They were not wrong about that part. My right knee had 3 pieces of shrapnel in it from a vehicle that stopped being a vehicle outside of Sangin in the summer of 2018. The VA said removing them involved more risk than leaving them. I said fine and stopped going to the VA. The knee was why I limped. The limp was useful. It completed the picture of someone small and diminished and easy to overlook. I was 37 years old. I had salt and pepper in my hair that had arrived early and stayed. In scrubs, with the limp, with the quiet, I was exactly what the hospital needed me to be. A body filling a gap on the schedule. A face without a story. I was so tired. It wasn't the kind of tired that sleep fixes. Dr. Marcus Holt practically owned the trauma bay. Tall, immaculate, even 16 hours into a shift, reeking of expensive cologne and the specific arrogance of a man who had never once had a decision reviewed after the fact and found wrong. He was the attending trauma surgeon, 38, board certified twice over, and aware of both facts at all times. He swept through the department the way weather sweeps through a landscape, without apology, without regard for what it touches. The staff moved around him the way water moves around stone, not from respect, but from the unconscious self-preservation of people who had learned that being in his way cost more than getting out of it. He found me on a Tuesday morning during what I would later understand was his good mood. I was reviewing the chart on the veteran in Bay 7, a man named Carlisle, 64, Marine Corps, 2 tours in Vietnam, now presenting with the specific combination of hypertension, anxiety-mediated chest pain, and the particular haunted quality behind the eyes that I recognized without being able to articulate to anyone in that building. I had spent 4 minutes with him before anyone else on the floor had gotten to his bay. And in those 4 minutes, I had identified that his IV line was infiltrated and placed a new one on the first stick in the left antecubital, with a tiny, perfect flash of crimson that I taped down before he registered it had happened. He had looked at me in the specific way that veterans look at people who do things correctly without fanfare. And I had looked back, and nothing was said. But something was understood. Dr. Holt came into Bay 7 without knocking. Nobody knocked at Mercy General. They were all too busy being important. And he looked at the chart I was holding, and he took it out of my hands. Not from my hands. Out of them. The distinction is physical. Float nurses don't review charts, he said, loud enough that the 2 residents at the nursing station could hear every syllable. You're not qualified to know what you're reading. I looked at the monitor. Mr. Carlisle's blood pressure was 178/104. His IV was infiltrated, I said. I replaced it. His pressure is elevated, and he hasn't been seen yet. I barely pay you to walk, Dr. Holt said. He handed the chart to a resident who was half his age and a third as competent. If we get a real trauma tonight, stay against the wall. He left. The 2 residents looked at me and then looked away. Mr. Carlisle, from Base 7, was looking at his own hands. His expression was the expression of a man who has watched people be dismissed his entire life and learned that silence is less painful than outrage. I returned to the supply cart. I restocked the IV lines. I did not explain myself. A muscle in my forearm moved once, and I noticed it, and I overridden it before it became anything else. I was very good at that. 6 years of practice. The practice started in a province that Dr. Marcus Holt had never heard of. In the break room at 7:45, I poured coffee that tasted like the Truman administration and sat with my back to the wall by the door. Old habit, non-negotiable. And I thought about why I was here. Not in the break room, here, at Mercy General, in this life. The answer was the same every time I asked it, because the alternative required being what I used to be, and I had decided, very deliberately, that I was done being that. You make that decision in the specific moment when you understand what it costs to be that kind of person for that long. And then you walk away, and you find the smallest, most invisible version of yourself that you can build. And you live inside it like it's a safe house. Because it is. I'm not Ghost 7 anymore. I'm Sarah Voss. I empty bedpans, and I restock supply carts, and I take jobs where nobody learns my name for long enough to ask questions about it. That was the deal I made with myself in the spring of 2021. In a VA debriefing room in Bethesda, Maryland, talking to a man in a suit who kept using the word transition, as if that word were large enough to hold what he was describing. I kept the deal. I was good at keeping things. The afternoon brought Dr. Holt back. He had apparently encountered something during his lunch break that had not improved his disposition, which in the morning had already been the kind of disposition that caused junior residents to take the long way around the corridor. He swept back through the ER at 1300 hours, with his white coat billowing and his jaw set. And he found me in Bay 3, doing a wound assessment on a 22-year-old with a laceration on his forearm that was deeper than it looked and was going to require a different closure technique than the resident had ordered. "You're in Bay 3, Dr. Holt said. You weren't assigned Bay 3. Bay 3 needed someone, I said. Bay 3 has an assigned nurse. She's on her break. He took the suture kit out of my hands. He handed it to a second-year resident named Yu, who had been watching us and who, to his credit, looked like he would rather be anywhere else on Earth. If I find you in a patient bay that isn't specifically assigned to you again, Dr. Holt said, I'll have your contract terminated. He looked at my knee when he said it. Not my face, my knee. I'll keep that in mind, Doctor, I said. I swallowed. It tasted like ash. He left. I looked at Resident Yu, who was now holding the suture kit, with the expression of a man who has been handed something he doesn't fully understand. I looked at the wound. It was 4 centimeters, irregular margins, with partial involvement of the fascia. The closure technique that had been ordered was going to leave a scar that was 3 times larger than it needed to be and had a meaningful chance of dehiscing in 72 hours. Double-layer closure, I said quietly. Start with the fascia. You'll want 3-No Vicryl for the deep layer, 4-No Monocryl for the surface. You looked at me, then at the wound, then at me again. I didn't hear that, he said. And he began. In 40 minutes, something was going to walk through those ER doors that would make every person in that building reconsider everything they thought they knew about the quiet woman limping through the supply corridor. The vibration didn't start in the air. It started in the fillings of my back molars. I was in the corridor outside Bay 6 when it hit. A low subsonic pressure that registered in my teeth before my ears had processed it. That kind of deep, rhythmic thud that civilian medevac helicopters don't generate because their rotors are lighter and faster and produce a different frequency entirely. This was heavy. This was multiple heavy rotors. Large disc diameter, low altitude, moving fast and decelerating. I stopped walking. I put my hand flat against the concrete wall and felt the vibration come through the building's skeleton. I identified the rotor signature in the same reflex with which I identify voices in a room, without effort, without deciding to. MH-60M Blackhawks. At least 2, possibly 4. They weren't landing at the helipad. The vibration was coming from the southwest. The helipad was north. They were coming down in the parking lot. Everyone else heard an emergency. I heard a pattern I'd heard before. The civilian ER staff responded the way civilian ER staff respond to things they haven't prepared for, loudly and poorly. Charge Nurse Delgado appeared from behind the nursing station with her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield, speaking into her radio in a voice pitched a half octave too high. 2 residents appeared from Bay 4 with the pallor of people who have heard about trauma medicine and are now being asked to meet it. Dr. Holt emerged from the attending's office with his phone in his hand and a look on his face I had never seen. Not arrogance, not contempt. Something smaller. Something that looked, briefly, like uncertainty. I pressed my back to the wall outside Bay 6. No. Not here. Not my problem. 4 MH-60Ms, visible now through the bay windows, USOCOM markings, landing in diamond formation in the south parking lot, and 2 of them were coming down with a patient configuration I recognized from the exterior profile alone. Litter carry. Tactical emergency extraction. Whatever was coming through those doors was going to need things no one in this building knew how to provide. The glass rattled in the bay windows. Ceiling tiles shifted. Delgado made a sound I won't reproduce. I shoved my hands into my pockets. I pressed harder against the wall. I told myself what I had been telling myself for 6 years. Someone else. Someone qualified. Someone who is still that. I'm just the float nurse. I'm just the limping liability. I'm just Sarah Voss from nowhere, with a knee full of metal and a life built deliberately small. My hands were shaking. That was new. I had not felt that in a very long time. Get the float nurse out of this corridor, Dr. Holt said. He said it to Delgado without looking at me, the way you say, get that out of the way about furniture. She's a liability. Put her in the supply room. Delgado took me by the elbow, not roughly, but firmly, the way someone moves something they need moved. And she pointed me toward the corridor that led to the supply room. I went. Not because I couldn't resist it, because I had decided 6 years ago that I was not doing this anymore, and that decision was the only thing between me and the person I used to be, and I was holding it with both hands. The supply room was 70 feet from Bay 1. I could hear everything. I heard the automatic doors burst open. I heard boots, not shoes, not clogs, boots on the linoleum, multiple sets, moving in the tactical spread of people who have practiced moving together until the movement is reflex. I heard Dr. Holt's voice, commanding, asserting his authority the way he always did. I heard one sentence from a voice I did not recognize, male, flat, entirely without accommodation. "Step back, sir." I heard Dr. Holt begin to respond. And then I heard the monitors in Bay 1 go from alarmed to critical, the pitch shifting upward in the specific pattern that means the situation has just changed category. I heard someone say the words, "tension pneumo." And I heard the sound of a team that did not know how to address tension pneumo looking at each other while a man was dying. I stayed in the supply room, my hands pressed flat against the metal shelving. I counted the masks. I was very good at counting things when I needed to stop hearing other things. 1, 2, 3. Then the vibration changed. Not the rotor sound. That had gone quiet when they landed. Something else. The air pressure of movement in a large space, moving fast, coming toward me. The supply room door opened. He was large, 6'2", in full tactical kit, still wearing his plate carrier and his comms gear, face streaked with something I identified immediately and did not allow myself to process yet. He was followed by 2 others in similar kit, and behind them, in the corridor, I could see 2 more. They were moving with the specific economy of people who have a specific destination and have already eliminated every other option. He looked at me. The vibration in the building's concrete had become a thing I felt in my sternum. "Sergeant Holt is about to code," he said. He did not explain himself. He did not introduce himself. "We need a 28 gauge over the needle catheter inserted at the second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, right side now. Nobody out there has done that outside a textbook." I looked at my hands. They were flat against the shelving. They were not shaking anymore. "There's an attending trauma surgeon," I said. "He doesn't know what he's doing," the man said. "I know you're in here. I need to know if you're still operational." I looked at the wall behind him. I looked at the shelf of masks I had been counting. He took 1 step forward. "Ghost 7, he said. Not a question, a statement. The word landed in the supply room like something physical. It filled the space between us the way sound fills a room and does not leave. I was the only person in that corridor who did not look around to find the source of the name. I looked at my hands. Then I looked at him. He was looking directly at me, not searching the corridor behind me, not waiting for clarification. He had found what he was looking for by the specific quality of my stillness, the way I hadn't moved, the way I hadn't looked confused. He had known she was here, I was here, and he was simply waiting for confirmation. I pushed off the shelving. Not fast. I walked. My posture changed in a way that I could feel in my spine. Something that had been held deliberately compressed for 6 years, allowing itself just slightly, just barely, just enough to be functional, to straighten. I did not feel larger. I felt aligned. "Clear the bay," I said. My voice did not sound like it had sounded in 11 months at Mercy General. It was not louder. It was different in texture, specific and cold and without ambiguity. the voice of someone who has given commands in places where ambiguity got people buried. The two personnel in the corridor stepped back before I had finished the sentence. The man who had said my call sign, Master Chief Petty Officer Wyatt, I would learn his name later, moved with me. He didn't ask where I was going. He'd found what he came for. I went through the corridor doors into Bay 1. Dr. Holt was there. 3 residents were there. 2 of the military personnel were there. The man on the gurney was young, 24, maybe 25, in partial tactical kit, chest dressing already soaked through. His oxygen saturation was at 78% and dropping. His trachea had deviated. His neck veins were distended. The clinical picture was not complicated. The clinical intervention was not complicated either, if you had done it before. Dr. Holt looked at me. "What is she?" "Move," I said. My voice wasn't quiet anymore. It was precise as a scalpel. He moved. It was the tone alone that accomplished it. I went to the gurney. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. I was inside the thing that I had been containing for 6 years, and it was operational, and it had not softened from disuse the way I'd hoped it might. "I need a 14-gauge angiocatheter, 3.5 inch, I said. To no one specifically. To everyone who could get it. Now. And I need that dressing off his chest. Someone moved. Someone got what I asked for. I found the second intercostal space on the right side of his chest, right along the mid-clavicular line. My fingers moved before my brain registered the command. Muscle memory from places this hospital could not conceive of. From a forward operating base in Helmand Province in 2019. From a truck bed in the dark. From a field position where I had done this exact thing with less light and less equipment, and a man screaming in a language I didn't speak. I had learned the count from a corpsman named Rivera, who had been, without question, the best trauma technician I had ever worked alongside. I did his count in my head. His voice, not mine. I confirmed the location. I pulled the skin taut. I advanced the needle at 90 degrees, bevel up, controlled pressure, waiting for the resistance change that tells you you've passed through the parietal pleura and entered the pleural space. I felt it. I advanced 2 more centimeters, and then I heard the release. A small, involuntary exhalation of trapped air, compressed above the level it should ever reach, escaping through the needle and into the room. The patient's oxygen saturation began to climb. 78, 81, 85. I secured the catheter. I taped it. I stepped back and looked at the monitor and watched the number move. The civilian staff was silent in a way that civilian ER staff are almost never silent. The military personnel were silent in a different way, the way of people who already knew what they were watching. Dr. Holt had not moved from the corner where he had stepped back. His face had no expression that covered what was happening. "He needs a chest tube to follow," I said. "Once he's stable. 32 French. And someone needs to get surgery on the phone and tell them they're getting a penetrating thoracic trauma with suspected hemopneumothorax, stage 2. He has time now, but not a lot of it." The saturation hit 92, 95. Master Chief Wyatt looked at the patient. Then he looked at me. "She moved the way people move when the stakes are real," he said quietly. Not to me, not to anyone. Just a fact, spoken aloud, that he apparently needed to make real by naming it. The patient opened his eyes. He looked at the ceiling. Then, slowly, he looked at me. "Is this—" he started. "Yes," I said. "You're going to be okay." He closed his eyes. I stepped back from the gurney and became aware, for the first time, of everyone in the room. The residents, the charge nurse, the civilian staff, Master Chief Wyatt and his 4 personnel, and Dr. Marcus Holt, who was standing in the corner of Bay 1 with his arms at his sides and his face doing something it had probably never done before in a professional context. It was quiet. Wyatt turned to the room. This woman's name is Senior Chief Petty Officer Sarah Voss, SEAL Team 6 Combat Service Support. Call sign Ghost 7. 4 combat deployments between 2014 and 2021. Afghanistan, Iraq, and 2 others I'm not authorized to name in a civilian hospital. Primary combat medic for Task Unit Bruiser's forward element in Helmand Province. She personally kept 11 operators alive under direct fire during the Sangin exfil in 2019, 2 of whom were not expected to survive. She was awarded the Navy Cross, the second highest military decoration the United States Navy bestows. She was recommended for the Medal of Honor. She said no. Resident U made a sound. Someone near the nursing station made a sound. Wyatt looked at Dr. Holt. "She is not a float nurse," he said. He said it with the specific flatness of a man who has stated his final fact on a subject and has no interest in discussing it further. Dr. Holt said nothing. Then Master Chief Wyatt straightened. And then, without a signal I could see, all 4 of his personnel straightened with him. The sound their gear made as they came to attention, the small clicking shift of plate carriers and equipment redistributing, was the only sound in Bay 1. Wyatt raised his right hand. Slow, deliberate, precise. He held the salute. All 4 of them held it. The sound of their gears settling into stillness was louder than anything else in the room. I looked at my hands. I looked at the patient, who was breathing. I looked at the wall. I looked at Wyatt. I returned the salute. My right arm came up with the same precision it had come up with 100 times before on the other side of the world, in places that existed in my memory with the clarity of things that happen to your body and not just to your mind. Charge Nurse Delgado had both Huaju's hands over her mouth. Resident U was looking at the ceiling in the way people look at ceilings when they are deciding whether to cry. Dr. Holt was looking at the floor. Mr. Carlyle, from Bay 7, had wheeled himself to the doorway of Bay 1 on his IV pole, and he was watching. He did not look surprised. He had the expression of a man who recognized something he'd seen before, in a different form, in a different place. The specific expression of a veteran watching another veteran be acknowledged. He nodded once, slowly to himself. I dropped the salute. Wyatt dropped his. His personnel followed. 3 minutes later, Dr. Holt's hospital privileges were suspended, pending an inquiry into multiple patient care incidents that had been, apparently, under review by the administration for some time. I learned this from Delgado, who found me in the supply room at 1800 hours. She said it in the voice of someone who has been waiting a long time to say something. I said that was good. I said I hoped Mr. Carlyle's blood pressure had come down. She said it had. She said he was resting. I finished restocking the supply cart, IV lines, 28-gauge catheters, dressing supplies, everything in the order I'd established in month 2 at Mercy General. Because even then the muscle memory had insisted on an order that made sense under pressure. I counted the masks. I arranged them in the top drawer, 12 to a row, the way I always did. I heard Wyatt in the corridor, speaking to someone on comms. I heard the distant sound of rotors warming back up in the south parking lot. And I heard the difference between them and anything civilian. The heavy rhythmic authority of aircraft that go places other aircraft don't. I listened until I couldn't hear them anymore. The fluorescent light hummed above me, low, abrasive, burrowing behind the eyes. I closed the supply drawer. Still here, still whole.